When the woman I loved chose to abort our child. And reached out years later. When I was 20, I started seeing a woman who was 36. We hit it off right away. Great conversations, fun to hang out with, and the sex was good. I should mention that she was a single mother of 4 boys. She had been married to a man in the Air Force, but he cheated on her repeatedly and eventually left, leaving her to raise their children alone. About a year and a half into our relationship, she got pregnant. I was thrilled, but her reaction was very different, which I could understand, given she already had 4 kids. Early on, we didn't know the baby's gender, but she mentioned she'd be happy if it was a girl. It made sense, after all, she already had 4 boys. We had moved in together a few months before she got pregnant, and everything was going well. When it came time for the ultrasound to find out the baby's gender, I was really excited. I even took off work early to take her to the appointment. At the doctor's office, things started out normal enough. The doctor made small talk, asking how we were doing and if it was our first baby. I was over the moon because this was my first child, and I loved this woman. We had a great relationship and had never had a single argument. What happened next is something I will never forget. The doctor applied the gel to her belly and started the ultrasound. A few moments later, he looked over at me, smiling, and said, "Congratulations, it's a boy." I was so happy. But then I looked over at her, and I could see she wasn't. She immediately wiped off the gel, sat up, and said, "I'm not keeping it. I'm going to get an abortion," and walked out of the room, leaving me sitting there with the doctor. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say or how to react. The moment felt surreal, like I was floating. Somehow, I made my way back to the car to meet her. She told me flatly that she didn't want a boy, and there wasn't much room for discussion. Over the next few weeks, I tried to talk to her, to understand, to maybe change her mind. But soon, I had to go out of town for a trip I had already planned. I left on a Friday afternoon, and that night, she called to tell me she was going to get an abortion the next morning. I was crushed. A part of me still thought she wasn't serious, or maybe she was just upset. I begged her not to go through with it until I got back so we could talk more. Looking back, I realized she had probably already made the appointment, but at the time, I didn't think about it. I don't remember how that conversation ended, but when I returned home, I walked into the kitchen, and she was there, cooking for her kids. As soon as she turned to the side, I could tell her belly was no longer round. She had done it. She had the abortion while I was away. I didn't say a word. I just turned around, walked out of the house, got in my car, and drove away. I left everything I owned at her place and never looked back. Now here's the strange part. About 4 years later, I was at a gas station, and guess who pulled up beside me? I heard someone call my name and turned around. It was her. By this time, I had a son of my own. She walked over to talk to me, then froze when she saw my son in the back seat. "Whose child is that?" she asked. "That's my son," I replied. She looked shocked. "And he's with you?" "Yeah, why wouldn't he be?" "He's my child," I said. She started explaining why she had the abortion. She told me that she had been afraid I would leave her to raise another child alone, just like her ex-husband had done. As a single mother of 4 boys, she couldn't take the risk of being abandoned again, especially by a younger guy in his 20s. For the record, I would never have left her. I take care of my children, always. I told her it was water under the bridge. I forgave her and said I understood why she made the choice, even though it had hurt me deeply. We said goodbye and didn't talk again for another 3 years. Then, out of the blue, she contacted me again, asking if we could talk. I was single at the time, so I agreed. I went over to her place, and she told me she still loved me, that I was the one who got away. She said she regretted her decision and wished she could do things differently. She even asked if we could try again and maybe have a child together in the future. I shut that idea down for a number of reasons. Later that evening, I met her sons again. They had grown so much. They weren't the little boys I had known. They remembered me and were excited to see me, telling me how their mom still talked about me and how they'd ask about me from time to time. During our conversation, I asked her why she had reached out after all these years. She explained that she had gotten married, had a 1-year-old child, and her husband had been abusive. He had been arrested for assault and battery and was currently in jail. She said all of this had made her reflect on how well I had treated her, which was why she wanted to reconnect. But I had to turn her down. My life was moving in a different direction, and I was preparing to move out of state. Our moment had passed. Even though it hurt deeply at the time, I never held the abortion against her. I understood it was her body, her choice, and she had to do what she felt was best for her and her children. For the record, the child she had with her husband was also a boy.